A locked room. A dead body. No forced entry. How could Arthur Blackwood, the city's golden boy, vanish from the inside? Detective Reed said, "Something here doesn't add up. This wasn't suicide. This was calculated. Every clue vanishes. Every suspect has a secret. And a ghost from the past is pulling the strings." Julian Hayes said, "I had nothing to do with Arthur's death." Eleanor Blackwood said he had enemies. "More than you know. But the killer is no ordinary criminal. He's an ex-agent, a master of deception, always one step ahead. Can Detective Reed unravel the truth before he disappears again?" Detective Reed said, "I know you're out there, and I will find you." Was it the jealous wife, the ambitious partner, or a shadowy figure lurking in the darkness? Like, subscribe, and watch the full video to know the mystery behind the crime murder in The Ghost Protocol Killer. The city held its breath. Arthur Blackwood, a titan of industry, a philanthropist whose name graced countless charities, was dead. Not in a blaze of scandal, not in a public tragedy, but in the silent solitude of his locked study. A seemingly impossible demise that sent ripples of shock and disbelief through the very foundations of high society. The room itself was a testament to Blackwood's refined taste, a sanctuary of leather-bound books and antique artifacts. Now it was a tableau of unanswered questions. The heavy oak door, bolted from the inside. The single window latched shut. No signs of forced entry, no discernible struggle. It was as if Blackwood had simply ceased to be. Enter Detective Inspector Evelyn Detective Reed. A woman forged in the crucible of countless investigations, her reputation preceding her like a shadow. Known for her meticulous mind, her unwavering focus, and an uncanny ability to see the threads others missed, Detective Reed was the antithesis of the chaotic scene before her. Her eyes, sharp and perceptive, scanned the room, absorbing the incongruities that whispered beneath the surface of the apparent stillness. The initial assessment pointed towards the grim finality of death, but offered little in the way of explanation. The medical examiner's preliminary report was inconclusive, citing no obvious trauma. Suicide seemed a plausible, albeit unsettling, conclusion given the locked room. Yet something felt fundamentally wrong. A subtle dissonance in the otherwise seamless puzzle. Detective Reed, a believer in the silent language of crime scenes, meticulously examined the points of entry. The sturdy bolt on the inside of the door was firmly in place. The window latches were secure. There were no scratch marks, no telltale signs of tampering. It was a genuine locked room mystery, a conundrum that defied easy explanation. But the stillness was deceptive. The broken teacup, lying in shattered fragments near the overturned armchair, hinted at a moment of sudden disruption. A tremor in the final moments. Had Blackwood been startled? Had something unexpected occurred just before his death? These were the silent questions echoing in Detective Reed's mind. Sergeant Miller, the first officer on the scene, recounted the discovery. The frantic phone call from Blackwood's personal assistant, Olivia Carter, who had been unable to reach him. The forced entry by security, revealing the grim scene within. Miller's account was straightforward, adhering strictly to the facts as he found them. Yet, Detective Reed listened intently, searching for the unsaid, the subtle nuances that might betray a deeper truth. Olivia Carter, Blackwood's devoted personal assistant. Her distress seemed genuine, her grief palpable. She spoke of Blackwood with a reverence that suggested a deep and abiding loyalty. But in the theater of grief, even the most convincing performance could conceal a hidden script. Detective Reed's gaze lingered on her, a silent assessment taking place beneath a veneer of professional courtesy. The preliminary forensic report painted a frustratingly clean picture. Minimal fingerprints, wiped surfaces, no trace evidence that screamed foul play. It was as if a phantom had been in the room, leaving no tangible mark of their presence. This absence of evidence, in itself, became a significant clue in Detective Reed's mind. A meticulous cleaning, a deliberate erasure. This was not the chaotic aftermath of a spontaneous act. On Blackwood's mahogany desk lay an antique letter opener, its silver surface gleaming innocently. A seemingly innocuous object, Yet in the confined space of a locked room, any object could transform into a potential weapon. Detective Reed carefully bagged it as evidence, her mind already considering its weight, its sharpness, its potential to inflict harm. Blackwood's life, as revealed through his meticulously kept files and appointment calendar, was a complex tapestry of business dealings, charitable engagements, and social obligations. A man at the zenith of his influence, seemingly without a visible enemy. Yet, Detective Reed knew that beneath the polished veneer of success, resentments and rivalries could fester, hidden beneath layers of civility. Eleanor Blackwood, his estranged wife, presented a study in controlled grief. Her words were measured, her emotions carefully modulated. Their separation had been amicable, she claimed, a mutual parting of ways. But Detective Reed sensed a deeper current beneath the surface, a lingering tension that belied the carefully constructed narrative. The intricacies of a broken marriage often held secrets more potent than any business rivalry. Julian Hayes, Blackwood's ambitious business partner, exuded an air of cool professionalism, bordering on detachment. He spoke of Blackwood with respect, but his eyes held a flicker of something unreadable, perhaps relief, perhaps something darker. Their partnership, Detective Reed learned, had been marked by both collaboration and competition, a delicate balance of shared ambition and individual aspirations. Had that balance tipped? As the city outside hummed with oblivious life, Detective Reed returned to the silent stage of the crime. In the stillness of the night, the room seemed to whisper its secrets. She moved slowly, deliberately, her flashlight beam illuminating details she might have missed in the initial flurry of activity. The overturned armchair, the shattered teacup, the locked door, the latched window. The pieces were all there, but the picture they formed remained stubbornly incomplete. The antique letter opener lay sealed in its evidence bag, a silent witness. Had it played a role in Blackwood's demise? Or was it merely a red herring in a meticulously crafted deception? Detective Reed's instincts screamed that this was no ordinary death. The locked room, the absence of evidence, the subtle signs of a deliberate act, they all pointed to a killer who was not only cunning, but also possessed a rare and unsettling level of control. Back in the quiet solitude of her office, Detective Reed began to piece together the fragments of information. The polished facade of Blackwood's life, the carefully constructed alibis, the frustrating lack of tangible evidence. It was a puzzle designed to mislead, a labyrinth intended to conceal the truth. But Evelyn Detective Reed was not easily deterred. She had a reputation for navigating the darkest corners of the human psyche, for finding the single loose thread that could unravel the most intricate of lies. And in the perplexing death of Arthur Blackwood, she sensed not an ending, but the beginning of a dangerous and intricate game. A game where the killer held all the cards, and the only way to win was to understand the rules they were playing by. The locked room was just the first move. The silence was deafening, and the ghost of Arthur Blackwood seemed to watch, waiting for the truth to finally emerge from the shadows. The investigation had begun. The grand Blackwood Manor, once a beacon of philanthropy and influence, now stood cloaked in an unsettling silence. The yellow tape, a stark barrier against the curious gaze of the outside world, whispered of tragedy within. Inside, the meticulous work of investigation had begun, each officer moving with a quiet purpose, aware of the delicate threads they were trying to untangle. Arthur Blackwood's study, the very heart of his intellectual pursuits and private deliberations, now bore the silent testament to his final moments. The overturned armchair, an incongruous detail in the otherwise orderly space, hinted at a sudden disturbance, a fleeting struggle perhaps, before the stillness descended. Detective Inspector Evelyn Detective Reed, a figure of quiet intensity amidst the flurry of activity, surveyed the scene with a keen, analytical gaze. Her eyes, sharp and perceptive, missed no detail, no matter how seemingly insignificant. The locked window, a baffling anomaly, continued to vex the initial assessment. If there had been no forced entry, how had death found its way into this sanctuary? Was it truly a self-inflicted act, a final, desperate decision made in solitude? Or was there a more sinister explanation lurking beneath the veneer of this seemingly impossible crime? Detective Reed's intuition, honed by years of navigating the murky depths of human deceit, leaned towards the latter. The immediate circle around Arthur Blackwood became the focal point of Detective Reed's initial inquiries. Eleanor, his estranged wife, a woman carrying the weight of unspoken resentments, and a life lived in the shadow of her husband's prominence. Their separation had been far from amicable, a tapestry woven with threads of bitterness and unresolved conflict. Julian Hayes, the ambitious business partner, a man whose professional ascent had been inextricably linked to Blackwood's patronage. His grief seemed genuine, yet beneath the surface, a flicker of something else, perhaps relief, perhaps something darker, danced in his eyes. And Olivia Carter, the devoted personal assistant, a steadfast presence in Blackwood's life for years. Her sorrow was palpable, a raw wound of personal loss, but even in her distress, Detective Reed sensed a carefully guarded reserve. Eleanor spoke of a man consumed by his work, a man who had grown distant and withdrawn in recent years. Her words were measured, each syllable carefully chosen, revealing as much in what she omitted as in what she declared. The estrangement, she claimed, was a mutual drifting apart, a natural consequence of diverging paths. But Detective Reed detected a subtle undercurrent of pain, a hint of betrayal that lingered beneath the surface of her composed demeanor. Julian, with his sharp suits and even sharper intellect, painted a picture of a visionary leader, a man of unwavering integrity. He spoke of recent business triumphs, of ambitious future projects that Blackwood had been passionately pursuing. Yet, when questioned about Blackwood's personal life, a carefully constructed wall went up. He claimed ignorance, a professional detachment that felt somewhat rehearsed. Olivia's grief seemed the most authentic, her voice thick with emotion as she recounted Blackwood's kindness and generosity. She spoke of his quiet routines, his meticulous habits. But when Detective Reed pressed about any recent unusual behavior or conflicts, a shadow crossed her face. She insisted that Blackwood had been his usual self, a pillar of stability. Yet, Detective Reed couldn't shake the feeling that Olivia knew more than she was letting on, a silent guardian of secrets. While the initial interviews offered glimpses into Blackwood's life, they also presented a confusing mosaic of conflicting perspectives. Detective Reed returned to the study, seeking solace in the silent witness of the room itself. Her gaze fell upon a seemingly unremarkable antique, a small, intricately carved wooden box sitting on a side table. It appeared out of place amidst the more contemporary decor, an artifact from a bygone era. There was something about this box, its aged wood and enigmatic carvings, that drew Detective Reed's attention. It felt significant, a silent sentinel guarding a forgotten truth. Its presence in Blackwood's modern study seemed deliberate, a tangible link to a past that the initial interviews had only hinted at. A faint sense of unease settled over Detective Reed as she considered its possible significance. Was it merely a decorative piece, a sentimental keepsake? Or did it hold a deeper meaning, a clue perhaps to the mystery that shrouded Arthur Blackwood's death? Whispers of Arthur Blackwood's past began to surface, fragmented tales of a life lived beyond the confines of philanthropy and business. Rumors of international dealings, of shadowy connections that stretched across continents. These were not the whispers of polite society, but hushed tones in dimly lit corners, hinting at a man who had once moved in a far more dangerous world. A world where secrets were currency and trust was a fragile commodity. Detective Reed delved into these nascent leads, sifting through old news articles, obscure online archives, piecing together a fragmented picture of Blackwood's earlier years. The image that began to emerge was far more complex, far more intriguing than the respected philanthropist the world had known. There were mentions of overseas ventures, of involvements in projects that skirted the edges of legality, of alliances formed and perhaps broken in the high-stakes game of international intrigue. One particular incident caught Detective Reed's eye, a failed international operation from years ago that had resulted in significant losses and unanswered questions. The name Spectre was mentioned in hushed tones within these old reports, a highly skilled operative who had seemingly vanished without a trace after the mission went south. A ghost in the machine, a phantom whose existence was shrouded in secrecy and speculation. As Detective Reed's investigation progressed, the seemingly disparate threads began to weave together, forming a more intricate and unsettling pattern. The locked room, the lack of obvious clues, the carefully constructed narratives of the witnesses, and now these whispers of a hidden past, a past that might hold the key to Arthur Blackwood's demise. The antique wooden box, with its silent secrets, seemed to hum with a forgotten energy, a tangible link to a history that someone desperately wanted to keep buried. The gentle rain outside continued to fall, washing over Blackwood Manor, but it could not wash away the growing sense of unease that settled over Detective Inspector Evelyn Detective Reed. The whispers of the past were growing louder, and they hinted at a truth far more dangerous than anyone had yet imagined. The locked room remained a frustrating enigma. No shattered windows, no forced doors, no secret passages revealed themselves to the probing eyes of the forensics team. Arthur Blackwood had seemingly evaporated from a sealed space, leaving behind an unsettling silence and a growing sense of unease. The initial assumption of self-harm or a tragic accident began to erode, replaced by the chilling realization that something far more deliberate had transpired within those elegant walls. Detective Inspector Evelyn Detective Reed, a woman whose intuition was as sharp as any scalpel, felt the subtle discordance in the scene like a persistent hum beneath the surface. The absence of struggle was not necessarily indicative of peace. It could also speak of swift, decisive action, a predator silencing its prey with clinical efficiency. The locked door, far from being a comforting seal, now felt like a calculated deception. The preliminary forensic report offered little solace. Standard toxicology screens came back negative. No discernible fingerprints beyond Blackwood's own and those of his immediate household were found within the study. Even microscopic fibers, usually the silent witnesses to a crime, were conspicuously absent. It was as if a ghost had committed the act, leaving no trace of its spectral presence. This meticulous absence of evidence was, in itself, a damning clue, whispering of a killer who understood the art of vanishing while the physical evidence remained elusive. Detective Reed's investigation into Arthur Blackwood's life began to yield more tangible leads. His financial affairs, once seemingly straightforward, revealed a recent flurry of activity. Significant sums of money had been moved through offshore accounts, their ultimate destination shrouded in secrecy. These transactions, occurring in the weeks leading up to his death, hinted at a man preparing for something, perhaps an escape, or perhaps a confrontation. The amounts involved were substantial, enough to warrant serious scrutiny. Was Blackwood involved in something illicit? Was he being blackmailed? Or was he simply restructuring his assets? The answers remained locked behind layers of financial obfuscation, mirroring the locked room where he met his end. Detective Miller, Detective Reed's pragmatic and grounded partner, brought a new element to the puzzle. A former employee of Blackwood Industries, a man named Thomas Ashton, had vanished in the immediate aftermath of Blackwood's death. Ashton had been dismissed several weeks prior for alleged insubordination and had reportedly left Blackwood's office with a bitter resentment simmering beneath his quiet demeanor. In the eyes of the initial investigative team, Ashton became the prime suspect, a disgruntled employee seeking revenge, perhaps even coercing his way into the locked study. A warrant was issued for his arrest, and the machinery of law enforcement began to grind, focusing its attention on locating the missing man. But something didn't sit right with Detective Reed. Ashton's profile, as pieced together by his colleagues and acquaintances, painted a picture of a man more prone to quiet brooding than violent action. His disappearance felt too convenient, too neatly packaged. Could he truly be the orchestrator of such a meticulously clean crime? Or was he a pawn in a larger, more sinister game? Detective Reed's gaze lingered on Ashton's photograph. His sudden vanishing certainly warranted investigation, but she couldn't shake the feeling that the police were being led down a predetermined path. The very tidiness of the crime scene, the utter lack of conventional evidence, screamed of a level of control and expertise that seemed beyond the capabilities of a recently fired office worker. Ashton's flight was fueled by fear, a primal instinct for self-preservation. He knew something, perhaps he had witnessed something, or perhaps he had simply become a liability in the killer's intricate plan. His disappearance, while making him a prime suspect in the eyes of the police, could also mark him as the next victim. Detective Reed, operating on her gut feeling, directed a separate, discreet line of inquiry into Ashton's background and his last known movements. She instructed her team to look beyond the obvious, to delve into the nuances of his relationships and the reasons behind his dismissal. She suspected that the key to unlocking Blackwood's murder lay not in the pristine silence of the locked room, but in the messy, complicated lives of those he left behind. The picture of Thomas Ashton that emerged was fragmented and contradictory. Some described him as a loner, harboring a quiet rage. Others remembered him as a diligent worker, unfairly dismissed. These conflicting accounts only deepened Detective Reed's suspicion that he was a piece being deliberately moved across the board, a red herring intended to distract from the true killer. Surveillance footage, painstakingly reviewed by Detective Reed's team, offered a chilling glimpse into Ashton's final hours. He wasn't simply on the run. He was being hunted. The encounter in the dimly lit alleyway suggested a confrontation, a forced meeting with someone who had a vested interest in his silence. The footage ended abruptly, leaving a lingering sense of foreboding. Whatever transpired in that alleyway likely sealed Ashton's fate. The convenient prime suspect was now, in all probability, another victim. The focus of the investigation began to subtly shift. Detective Reed's intuition, coupled with the unsettling lack of evidence at the primary crime scene and the suspicious disappearance of Ashton, pointed towards a killer operating with a level of sophistication that belied a simple act of revenge. This was not a crime of passion. This was a carefully orchestrated performance. Unseen, unheard by the bustling detectives, a silent observer continued to move through the periphery of the investigation. Alistair Finch, Blackwood's trusted legal counsel, offered his condolences and his cooperation, a picture of quiet professionalism. But beneath that veneer of respectability lay a mind as sharp and calculating as any seasoned operative. His presence at the station, seemingly supportive, was in reality a reconnaissance mission, a way to gauge the progress of the investigation and ensure his carefully constructed facade remained intact. Finch understood the intricacies of law enforcement, the predictable patterns of their inquiries. His past life, a chapter deliberately buried beneath layers of legal jargon and corporate dealings, had equipped him with the perfect tools for this deadly game. He knew how to erase his tracks, how to manipulate perceptions, and how to remain a ghost in the machine. The discovery of Thomas Ashton's body confirmed Detective Reed's grim premonition. He had not simply vanished. He had been silenced. The scene suggested a swift and brutal end, far removed from the controlled environment of Blackwood's locked study. This secondary crime scene, however, offered a crucial piece of the puzzle. Unlike the pristine scene at Blackwood's residence, Ashton's death offered a glimpse into the killer's methods when operating outside his carefully controlled environment. A small detail easily overlooked caught the eye of a sharp-witted forensic technician. A specific knot used to restrain Ashton, a knot not commonly known, hinting at specialized training. Detective Reed, reviewing the photographs of the scene, felt a flicker of recognition. The knot, though unfamiliar to local law enforcement, resonated with something she had once encountered in old case files. Whispers of clandestine operations and highly skilled individuals operating in the shadows. Alistair Finch watched the news unfold, a detached observer of his own carefully crafted narrative. The discovery of Ashton's body served a dual purpose. It seemingly confirmed Ashton's guilt in Blackwood's murder in the public eye, while simultaneously eliminating a potential loose end. He was playing a complex game of chess, and the police were merely reacting to his calculated moves. But Detective Inspector Evelyn Detective Reed was not easily deterred. The inconsistencies in the case, the unsettling lack of evidence, and now the brutal silencing of the prime suspect only fueled her resolve. She knew, deep down, that she was dealing with a far more cunning and dangerous adversary than a simple disgruntled employee. The locked room was not a testament to an impossible crime, but a carefully constructed illusion, designed to conceal a truth that lay hidden beneath layers of deception. The game had begun, and Detective Reed was determined to see it through to its deadly conclusion, even if it meant venturing into the shadowy world of ghosts and secrets. The polished facade of Arthur Blackwood's life began to crack under Detective Reed's relentless scrutiny. The philanthropist, the pillar of society. His past, it turned out, was a labyrinth of international dealings, shadowy alliances, and buried secrets. Years ago, Blackwood's name had been whispered in connection with events far beyond the city's borders, events that involved high stakes and even higher risks. Detective Reed, driven by the nagging feeling that the locked room was a carefully constructed illusion, delved deeper. The local police archives offered little beyond Blackwood's public persona, but a discreet inquiry through Interpol, leveraging a contact she'd cultivated during her academy days, yielded a more intriguing and unsettling picture. Operation Nightingale, a covert intelligence operation shrouded in secrecy. Blackwood's involvement was indirect, a facilitator, a man with deep pockets and even deeper connections. But the operation had gone catastrophically wrong in Sarajevo. Lives were lost, and a key operative, known only by the codename Spectre, vanished without a trace in the aftermath. Spectre, highly skilled, ruthlessly efficient, a phantom in the world of espionage. His disappearance was chalked up to collateral damage, another casualty of a messy operation. But the file contained whispers, unofficial notes hinting at betrayal, at someone within the operation pulling the strings for their own gain. Blackwood's name surfaced in these whispers, not as a direct participant in the field, but as someone who stood to benefit from the operation's success, or perhaps its failure. The timing, the secrecy surrounding Blackwood's recent financial transactions. It all started to coalesce in Detective Reed's mind. Could the events of the past be casting a long shadow into the present? Could the locked room murder be connected to a ghost from a forgotten mission? The seemingly random piece of technical jargon found near Blackwood's body, initially dismissed as insignificant, now took on a chilling resonance. Detective Reed, recalling her brief training in signals intelligence, recognized the symbols. They were consistent with outdated encryption protocols used by clandestine operatives decades ago, protocols favored by Spectre. The connection, though tenuous, sent a jolt through her. A former intelligence operative, skilled in tradecraft, capable of meticulous planning and eliminating any trace. It fit the profile of the elusive killer she was hunting. The locked room, the lack of evidence, the almost supernatural cleanliness of the crime scene, these were not the hallmarks of an amateur. Sarajevo, a place of shadows and secrets. Blackwood's study, a place of sudden, inexplicable death. The distance in time and geography seemed vast, yet Detective Reed felt an invisible thread connecting them. The antique communication device, initially just an oddity, now held a potential key. Its age, its sophisticated concealment. It spoke of a bygone era of espionage, an era that Spectre inhabited. Could this seemingly innocuous object be a relic of that past, a silent witness to the present crime? The mission in Sarajevo had gone wrong, terribly wrong. Someone had betrayed the team. Someone had profited from the chaos. The whispers in the file suggested Blackwood's involvement, not directly in the field, but perhaps as the orchestrator, the one who set the pieces in motion. Revenge. It was a motive as old as time, and one that could certainly drive a highly trained operative to meticulously plan and execute a seemingly impossible crime. Spectre, presumed dead, could have been biding his time, waiting for the opportune moment to resurface and settle old scores. But who was Spectre? The file offered no clear identity, only the ghost-like image and the whispers of his capabilities. He was a chameleon, a master of disguise, capable of blending seamlessly into any environment. He could be anyone. Eleanor, the estranged wife, harboring years of resentment? Julian, the ambitious partner, possibly double-crossed in past dealings? Even Olivia, the seemingly devoted assistant, might have had her own reasons for hidden animosity. Spectre could be any of them. A wolf in sheep's clothing, patiently waiting for the right moment to strike, or perhaps, having already struck and now observing the unfolding investigation from the shadows. The game had changed. This was no longer just a murder investigation. It was a hunt for a ghost, a confrontation with a past that refused to stay buried. And Detective Reed was beginning to realize that the seeds of doubt planted in Sarajevo years ago had finally blossomed into deadly fruit in the heart of her city. The locked room was just the beginning. The true mystery lay hidden in the shadows of a forgotten operation and the vengeful heart of a phantom. Days bled into nights for Detective Inspector Evelyn Detective Reed. The Blackwood case, initially a perplexing locked room mystery, had morphed into something far more sinister, a puzzle with deliberately missing pieces. The lack of discernible evidence at the crime scene, the clean sweep that suggested a professional hand, gnawed at her. Suicide was out. Accident improbable. That left murder, but a murder committed by someone who seemed to anticipate their every move. The anonymous encrypted message had arrived like a phantom whisper in the digital wind. Untraceable, its contents cryptic yet undeniably pointed. A sequence of numbers, a seemingly random date, and a single word, chimera. Chimera, a mythical beast, a composite of disparate parts. For anyone else, it would have been meaningless. But for Detective Reed, it resonated with the fragmented whispers of Arthur Blackwood's past. The clandestine international dealings that had surfaced like murky secrets dragged from the depths. The rumors of Spectre, the ghost operative, were beginning to take a tangible form. The coordinates embedded within the numerical sequence led her to the industrial outskirts of the city, a labyrinth of abandoned warehouses and forgotten factories. A place where shadows danced and secrets festered. The air hung heavy with the smell of damp concrete and decay. An instinct, honed by years on the force, screamed caution. This wasn't a simple drop-off. This felt like a setup, a deliberate lure into the unknown. She drew her weapon, the cold steel a familiar comfort in the oppressive darkness. The interior was a cavern of forgotten industry. Echoes bounced off the high ceilings, amplifying every creak and groan of the aging structure. The air was thick with the scent of rust and neglect. She moved with deliberate steps, her senses on high alert. A glint of metal caught her eye, almost invisible against the grimy floor. A thin wire stretched taut across her path. A booby trap. Simple, effective, and designed to incapacitate. This wasn't the work of an amateur. This confirmed her growing suspicion. The killer possessed specialized skills, the hallmarks of someone trained in the shadows. The near miss sent a jolt of adrenaline through her. The anonymous tip wasn't just a clue. It was a test, a demonstration of the killer's capabilities. He was playing a game and she was a pawn on his board. Meanwhile, the disappearance of Thomas Ashton, the disgruntled former employee, had taken a grim turn. His body had been discovered in a derelict apartment building, staged to look like a suicide. A note, filled with despair and self-blame, lay beside him on the surface. It was an open and shut case. A troubled man, unable to cope with the fallout from his past grievances with Blackwood, had taken his own life. The local police were ready to close the file. But Detective Reed couldn't shake the feeling that this was another carefully constructed illusion. The forensic reports offered little to contradict the suicide narrative. But Detective Reed's trained eye caught a subtle anomaly. A faint discoloration on Ashton's wrist, almost hidden beneath his shirt cuff. It was inconsistent with a self-inflicted death. She visited the grim apartment, retracing Ashton's last supposed moments. The scene felt sterile, too neat. The supposed suicide note lacked a genuine sense of despair. Felt staged. A single cigarette, but in the ashtray, a brand Ashton didn't smoke. A small detail, easily overlooked, but for Detective Reed, it was a discordant note in the carefully orchestrated symphony of deception. Her investigation into Ashton's death became a parallel track, running alongside the Blackwood case. She meticulously reviewed every piece of evidence, every witness statement, searching for the threads that connected the two seemingly disparate events. Ashton's disappearance, the anonymous tip leading to the booby-trapped warehouse, the staged suicide. It all pointed to a single meticulous hand at work. The killer wasn't just eliminating Blackwood. He was systematically silencing anyone who could potentially link him to the crime. The pieces of the puzzle were slowly starting to align. The Chimera reference wasn't just about Blackwood's past. It was about the composite nature of the killer himself, a blend of lethal skills and calculated intellect. And the anonymous tip, the dangerous game in the warehouse, felt like a deliberate taunt, a way for the killer to gauge her abilities, to see how close she was getting. The game had escalated. The killer was no longer just covering his tracks. He was actively engaging with the investigation, a phantom daring her to catch him. And Evelyn Detective Reed, a detective who thrived on the intricate dance of deduction, was ready to accept the challenge. The anonymous tip hadn't deterred her. It had ignited a fire, a fierce determination to unmask the ghost who moved in the shadows.